Fabricamos talento. Fabricamos innovación. Y, cómo no, sostenibilidad. Fabricamos una nueva economía. Y un mundo nuevo, en 3D, por supuesto. Pero sobre todo, fabricamos futuro. Y es que fabricamos empleo para más de 137.000 trabajadores. Fabricamos oportunidades globales de negocio en un espacio de más de 10 millones de metros cuadrados. Y fabricamos servicios de vanguardia y ventajas competitivas para más de 175 empresas. Consorcio de la Zona Franca. Fabricamos oportunidades para tu futuro.
Welcome to D-Factory, the factory that develops talent, technology, innovation, and of course in the heart of Barcelona. After all, D-Factory is consolidating Barcelona as a European capital of development for Industry 4.0, for digitalization, for transformation, creating 1,500 direct jobs and 5,000 indirect jobs in the city, close to the metro, the harbour and the airport. And promoted by the Consorcio de la Zona Franca de Barcelona.
It's a time of changes. Now is the time to move on. This is the time for solutions. Feel the motion. BNEW is born. BNEW, now I'm connected to you. BNEW, BNEW will do it for you. This is the time for solutions. BNEW is for you.
Pues son las 4 de la tarde y estamos llegando ya al final de BNEW, en esta vertical de la industria digital. In this very last session at Digital Industries at BNEW Congress, we want to finish these panels with a session focusing on Africa. It's called the evolution of the African digital landscape because we are convinced that digital industry should not leave anyone behind, let alone the continent of Africa. We're going to have Jalil Slimani. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. He's the head of corporate development of the Association of Mediterranean Chambers of Commerce. And he's going to have a talk with Hajar Mortaji. She's the head of strategy, development, partnership, and communication at Digital Development Agency of Morocco. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And also Karim Palmieri. He's a partner of Quadrian Global. Thank you for being here, Karim. So it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, my dear experts. It is a pleasure to be here to close this digital industry day and BNEW's last conferences with you. We will have the opportunity today to talk about how Africa is dealing with the digital revolution that is affecting the world. We have, for this panel, as mentioned, Mrs. Hajar Mortaji, representing the governmental agency in charge of digital transformation for the Kingdom of Morocco, and Mr. Karim Palmieri, who's an expert in infrastructure development, startups ecosystem, and also venture capital in startups since I think 3 or 4 years now.
Very recently, very recently.
So let's tap into the subject we have today. Africa offers an incredible opportunity to change the way things were done in the conventional way, and what we have in our continent, in the African continent, as a breakthrough that could be seized, is that the African continent has fewer legacy challenges to deal with in its way of going through this digital transformation quickly than more developed countries. Today, we can feel this opportunity in a variety of fields inside this digital transformation that is happening. Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and internet platform softwares that today are responding to current needs that the continent has and doesn't need to go through the process that was taken by more developed countries. Despite this this potential, we still feel that the African continent lacks a little bit the necessary ecosystem and the necessary regulatory frameworks that would be needed to accelerate and make the digital age a stronger thing for the continent. So we'll a little bit go through some experiences as Morocco is doing right now through the ADD, how some African countries are tackling these issues and how they are trying to provide a better ecosystem and seizing all the opportunities that the digital revolution can bring to its citizens. So I'll start with you, Hajar. Can you explain us a little bit how all these subject or field was considered by the government of Morocco?
So thank you, Jalil. As you know, Morocco entered a new development era. And during the last decades, and under the enlightened leadership of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, Morocco has made strategic decisions to organize its economic development, to modernize its production potential, and to select its core businesses. So Morocco has set and implemented an integrated and comprehensive strategy. And during the last years, Morocco is consolidating the openness of its economy and in the integration of its economy into the global economy to position Morocco as an attractive platform at the door of Europe. So in order to capitalize on the achievements of this first development phase, which was a success, and in order to capitalize also on the learnings from the COVID-19 crisis, a new roadmap has been drawn for the country under the leadership of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI. And this new roadmap is setting the human at the heart of the transformational process. So this new roadmap, called the New Development Model, aims at rising up the living conditions and standards of all Moroccans through digital. So through this new roadmap, we are making of the digital transformation of the country a national priority. So digital is considered as a key lever for the transformation and the development of the country, as a powerful engine for the economic growth of the country, thanks to the multiplier effect it has on all the sectors, and also as a key lever for the global and the collective prosperity. So here, and in order to allow digital to fully play its role as a socio-economic development lever, and also to place Morocco on the chessboard of the most competitive and attractive digital and technological ecosystem on the continent, Morocco has created the Digital Development Agency, known as ADD, which is the government's instrument to implement Morocco's digital development strategy. So here, and in order to achieve this great ambition, the agency is operating on 3 strategic business areas that are aiming respectively at first initiating the digital development and transformation of the administration with the perspective of enhancing the citizens' experience at optimizing the citizens' journey through digitally transforming the administration and reinforcing its efficiency. The second area we are operating on aims at transforming and leading the transformation of the economy with the objective and the aim of creating a solid digital ecosystem led by great startups and national technological players that will first contribute to create an additional added value to the economy, but also will contribute to solve the problems of the national tissue of enterprises and reinforce their competitiveness. The third area we operate on aims at transforming society in order to allow all Moroccans to fully benefit from the advantages offered by digital. So the agency is working at the central level and capitalizes on its network of partners at the local and regional and national levels in order to lay the foundations for successful digital transformation in Morocco. And in each business area we are operating on, we are focusing on developing catalytic projects that will act as locomotives for the development of each business area we are operating on.
Thank you. Well, now I'm going to Karim and his private sector perspective, and I'll ask you what, in front of these policies and these frameworks that are created in some countries or lacking in others, what would be what's moving the private sector into feeling more comfortable developing itself in the African continent?
Thank you, Jadid and Hajar. Seems like Morocco is being very busy, which is a great thing. I think from my perspective, if you track the Africa story in terms of digitalization, etc., it's you see pockets of success. So as you said, you leapfrog hard infrastructure into mobile phones, and as you kind of sort of work into governments and realize that you can digitize administrations, which is a great leap. I think the US already still struggle with that, whereas like some African countries are leaps and bounds ahead. And all these pockets offer different types of opportunities, digital health, etc. I think one aspect which, from an investment perspective, is always really interesting about digitization, is that it allows a certain flow both ways. Right, so you have, as you said, sort of startups in specific African countries which can get global exposure, and you get investors globally who can then have Africa exposure, and that sort of is much more fluid than if you were looking at hard infrastructure projects, even government level, large institutional money. So I think that sort of the building the bridge of investor confidence in that is a great role for digitization. Also, obviously, data-intensive activities, anything that provides sort of that transparency is always useful. A challenge, I think, a couple of years ago was that for smart money to come into Africa, even the most developed markets, it was very difficult to get the actual data of how your investment was being tracked. So I don't know how my agribusiness is tracking. Now with certain platforms, I think OCP is doing a great job in doing that, can track kind of the needs, the sort of volatility of the market. And so that's something that an external investor can actually look into and say, well, look, this is a platform that I understand, that I trust, and so therefore you start seeing FDI inflows. So I think that's quite interesting. And then what's happening more recently, what I've been interested in, is when you look at sort of venture capital investments, or you look at startup investments, startup ecosystems. There are a lot of countries in Africa that have kind of pioneered this or capitalized on this. So sort of aggressively kind of commercial countries where you see kind of the link. So when you look at the Kenyas, the Nigerias, et cetera, who have actually really pushed forward and said, look, this startup ecosystem is going to be the way we're going to build. I think Morocco is starting to do that in a more kind of sensible and structured way. And so building kind of more support for entrepreneurs, a kind of structured way to bring in smart money. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is more kind of a better flow of VC money. Traditionally, if you go into Africa, it's quite difficult to track how your investments are doing, I think Morocco has an advantage of having a certain amount of credibility in investments, so can essentially act as an investment platform. Personally, I've looked at a couple of businesses where I think you can start somewhere like the UK, you can start somewhere where it's a sort of relatively high-grade investment at a startup level, first base of investors, and then you go somewhere like Morocco where you can start commercializing and adapting to somewhere like to the rest of Africa. That's a kind of a very interesting dynamic, and I think it's being looked at by a lot of people in Morocco. So that's one aspect. I don't know if I asked more questions than I give answers, but.
We know that the venture capital money that is being driven to the African continent is still really limited.
Yeah.
And really concentrated in 2 or 3 countries. Is there some policies or a regulatory framework that you believe is a real constraint to the emergence of a venture capital presence in the continent?
From a very sort of like initial perspective,
yeah.
I would say that actually digitization plays a key role in this. Is what is that money going into, right? And so if you can better track your investments, then that's also one aspect. I think if startups around the world, when you see incubators, when you see accelerators, they provide ancillary services, so legal infrastructure, accounting subsidies, etc., to frame and support entrepreneurs as they build out their businesses. I think in some African countries that's done quite well. I think digital infrastructures allows for better support. So if you say, you know what, like all your kind of base business needs are dealt in what they call one-stop shop or an accelerator, then you begin to have kind of an easier path for an entrepreneur and a more comfortable path for an external investor coming into that business. Yeah, so for me that's actually quite, and I think we've had this happen in Morocco in the medical sector, and formalized documentation I think has been happening, and yeah, so I think that's where digitalization will play a role for that.
Well, I'll go back to Hajar to ask her, from the strategic point of view to the implementation, there's a long path. In the African continent, we're quite used to a lot of strategy and a little bit of implementation. But I think you were telling me that it's not only strategic lines what you have at ADD.
Yeah, as explained, we are working on developing and we are focusing on developing catalytic projects that will act as locomotives for the whole ecosystem. So to give you some examples, to foster the digital transformation of the administration, we have launched some structuring projects such as the interoperability platform, which is a national platform that aims at securing exchanges of documents between administrations, and which is a prerequisite for the digital transformation of the administrations and for optimizing the citizens' experience. So here, this is a prerequisite for the digitalization of the administration. Also, and in the same context, we are working on the development of a single national portal of the administration, which aims at allowing first all Moroccans to get to know all the information about the public services in Morocco, and second, to opt for the digital use of the service. At this stage, the portal only provides the informational aspects, and we are working with all the stakeholders at the agency to develop the required models that are like the digital locker, the identification and authentication, etc., that are prerequisites to move forward to the transactional aspects of the portal. I would like also to mention that the agency acts as a catalyst and as a facilitator of the digital transformation of the administration. And here we are developing mutual solutions, and we are promoting the adoptions by all the public partners that we are committed to accompany throughout their transformational journey. through providing tailored advisory, but also through developing applications depending on the needs of our partners that are provided by a digital factory of the agency, which was also one of the structuring projects we have launched. So all this said, what I would like to say that through launching all these projects, what we are seeking for is to optimize the citizens' experience and to confirm the positioning of Morocco as an attractive platform for investors, for startups, for innovators, for talents. And at the agency, and with all our partners, we are committed to build a modern, prosperous, and a pleasant nation to live in. Also, we have talked now about all the projects we have launched to transform the administration. And the second pillar of the digital transformation led in Morocco is related to the transformation of the economy. And here we, at the agency, with all our partners again, we are activating all the necessary required conditions to impulse the emergence of startup ecosystem led by strong entrepreneurs and innovators. And here one of the initiatives I would like to talk about is a program called Al-Khwarizmi, after the famous Arab mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. And here this project aims at creating an AI ecosystem in Morocco. And through supporting innovators in the AI throughout the development of their research. And we are also supporting them into converting their researchers into thriving businesses. So the idea also of this program is also to establish the collaborative framework between private companies and researchers with the perspective of building a dynamic AI ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And regarding the third pillar of the digital transformation of Morocco, we are working with all our partners in order to allow all Moroccans to fully benefit from the advantages offered by digital through developing the Moroccans' digital skills. And here we are daily caring to reduce inequality and avoid exclusions. And we are working on building a solid educational ecosystem that will provide all Moroccan dependents, depending on their level of education, with the suitable trainings that will allow us to build a solid digital generation that will be able to safely and efficiently manipulate the outcomes of this digital revolution. And here again, one of the most important projects we have recently launched is a project called Academia Raqmiya, which can be translated to Digital Academy. So this platform is an e-learning platform launched by the agency, and that provides for the citizens, for the administration, and for enterprises with tailored trainings in the digital domain. And here, what we are seeking for is to make sure that all Moroccans are equipped to fully benefit from the advantages offered by digital, to free their potential and thrive in this new era of digital.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's a lot of things that the agency is doing. You just made me think that I was wrong, that there is implementation after strategic lines. That's something that's not very common, but we were glad to see an African example or model going until the execution and making it happen. From what we heard, I retain basically the citizen at the center, yeah. The role model that the government has on its own activities to be digital, and the inception or the first move that the government tries to do, not not for the sake of being a big player on the industry, but to encourage the private sector to share that path with the government and follow afterwards and continue on these steps, feeling comfortable about what's surrounding. So, do you think, Karim, that these kind of ecosystem could be replicated all around Africa, or are there other models that you might know about?
I think the list of initiatives that Hajar put forward are pretty comprehensive. I think especially when you talk about sort of upskilling the economy in the digital space, it's something that's essential. And I think as either by default or by design, a byproduct of that is kind of sort of inclusion to the economy. So when we had the kind of conversations of unbanked population, et cetera, that's in some markets, that's something that's super prevalent, and so digitalization kind of starts to capture that. I guess in terms of even the banking sectors, et cetera, so the obvious ones. But I think if you're looking at that also as well as it then drives the ability to build this startup ecosystem, right, which would be very difficult to do without this kind of underlying infrastructure. To have said that I've seen this in other countries, I think globally, you probably see like all sorts of models. But again, this is what we said earlier, Africa is it's a number of environments, not just sort of one Africa, as it were, which I probably shouldn't say like that. But I think Morocco has always been very good at setting very strong precedents and acting as a sort of leader for new models, or at least very stable models across all sectors. In this particular case, I think what this will do is it will give kind of, as I said, that bridge for investment to happen. And I think something that might have been lagging before, just because of the exposure that Morocco has to particular investor sets, this will kind of help kind of globalize the connectivity of Morocco's investor base, potentially.
And I'll throw this question to both of you. I'll let you do the discussion if it appears. Does it mean that Morocco as a hub could transfer this knowledge to other countries, or these precedents you're mentioning, or the reality of each country needs the elaboration and the design of a specific ecosystem? Can we buy time and replicate these initiatives that the Agence de Développement Digital is doing in Morocco?
What I would like first to say is that, as I said earlier, in Morocco, we have put the digital transformation of the country a national priority. So we are working with all the stakeholders all together, confirming the will of everybody to allow digital to fully play its role as a socio-economic development lever. And so all this hard work done with all our partners, coupled with Morocco's geographic position, Morocco's large pool of high qualified talents, Morocco's large IT infrastructures and international infrastructure in general are placing Morocco as a digital hub and as a platform to attract investors, startups, etc. And the agency is working with some African countries in order to accompany them. For example, we received recently an African country that wanted to create an agency which will play the same role as the agency. So we are available to accompany all the African countries. So that's it.
What about you?
I think if we take one of the points that Hajar mentioned, which is Morocco's connectivity, and I think it's sort of vital for Morocco to be able to, given geographic positioning, given the multitude of trade partners, etc., and by default of kind of the role that Morocco plays, being at the forefront of digital integration, I think, with the rest of the world is super important. So it's not a question of being sort of miles ahead or behind, or actually behind is probably not ideal, but to be able to kind of maximize integration. So I think as Morocco's partners grow, as we try and bring those bonds together, they'll be learning from both sides. So, I mean, you can go as far as talking about sort of the financial sector, distributed finance, etc., and see where that takes you. And I think Morocco has been looking at how that space can kind of connect with current Moroccan financial ecosystem. I mean, today Morocco's banks are all over Africa, which is fine, so that's already plugged in, but what's the next stage? And so to be able to do that, it's a question of having the digital infrastructure to be able to integrate. So if you're a partner country, you will do an exchange of knowledge. I mean, that's just the nature of the digital space, right? So it's more about integration than sort of trying to get way too far ahead.
Oh, thank you. And what I retain from what just has been discussed, that for any big shift in the digital industry on an African continent, there's behind a high-level vision and the will that is implemented through all the partners that you have in the government. That's something that we'll see in several countries, makes it a long-term perspective and makes possible to develop the projects with a real framework and an execution plan that is adapted to this transformation on a long-term basis. What we see that from the governmental part, there's an implementation strategy, actions. You're also working on the private sector implication, and also on the citizenship knowledge on digital skills. We have, on this last aspect, there's a huge gap between what the labor market is asking and what the labor forces, African labor forces, are preparing right now, and some skills are still lacking to balance and get to what the labor market needs. Do you think these can be a challenge for the startup ecosystem, or for the funding that could be found in the African continent for the digital industry?
So will a lack of a digital infrastructure be a hindrance to a startup ecosystem? Is that the question?
No, the question is the lack of digital skills.
Yeah.
Is making money go less to the startups, making startups appear slower or in a very slow pace compared to their compared brothers or sisters in other regions.
I think you could say, I mean, absolutely. If you're not sort of at a certain level in the digital space, it's going to be very difficult to operate. I think also if you're looking at kind of Morocco specifically, the Moroccan market generally is it's interesting, but not a kind of a full target, especially in the digital space. Most people look at volume, and you're looking at sort of Pan-African efforts, global efforts. I think some of the Moroccan startups are now getting to unicorn status, but they're working on a kind of on a regional and global scale. So I think the ability to have a digital aspect to it is super important. I think the agency is probably taking that quite seriously and saying, well, look, we have all this hub of activity, we have all these skill sets, but they're limited by just like being on the ground. So how do we kind of use this sort of very rich talent pool which Morocco's talent pool is relatively like strong as far as Africa goes, and actually scale that, which is a sort of typical digital story. And so now you kind of see that education coming online. I guess that's part of the underlying dynamics. And then the outliers are everywhere, where you sort of see an entrepreneur who will take advantage of this digital space, education platforms, etc., healthcare, where it's just, you know what, rather than pass by sort of paper infrastructure, administrative infrastructure, etc., you just you have an app, and then that's sort of healthcare. And I think there's something in Morocco that's doing something like that, which I think is great. So that's yeah.
Well, I'll challenge you for a final recommendation to the industry to be a top-notch and a disruptive thing for the next years. What recommendations, or what do you think what point has to be tackled first?
I think the will, coupled with the right vision, the adoption of the suitable governance system, and the mobilization of the required means, and especially the mobilization of all the stakeholders are the prerequisites for a successful digital transformation that needs to cover all the aspects of the development, the administration, economy, and society, and that above all needs to place the human at the heart of the transformational process. That's it.
Well, you mentioned quite several times the money tracking aspect.
The money tracking aspect, I think the money tracking aspect is very important. If there's something that's potentially different, and something that I've been looking at is the ability to use, and it's not generally just in a digital form, but the ability to use the kind of the local market as a kind of bridge into like a bigger market. So, for example, I'm operating in Europe. There's a certain demographic or way to use kind of that ecosystem, whether it's digital or other, and I'm coming into Africa. Can I use somewhere like Morocco, or somewhere where actually kind of there is some sort of bridge to adapt to the broader market? And I think being able to provide those platforms in a digital space could be very important. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
I think we've given a broad perspective of what the African continent can offer, and how the path wouldn't be as we said at the beginning. Africa doesn't have the legacy that maybe Europe or the Western world would have, that allows us to go on a very quicker way of doing things, but it needs a high-level vision, governing bodies, regulatory framework, and the creation of an ecosystem, and securing the confidence of investors through preparing the labor force to be at a certain level, and making available data to the investors to assess and analyze where the money is being put and how the money could get back to them. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope we'll see you next year in the next BNEW, and wish you a lot of luck, and maybe you'll tell me a little bit more next year.
What happens?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insights about how the revolution, the digital revolution, is happening in Africa. Thank you so much. Bueno, pues nosotros estamos llegando ya, de hecho llegamos ya al final de este BNEW. Se pone un poquito la carne de gallina, porque hace casi un año que se está preparando este evento. Se acaba ya esta tercera edición. Aquí en esta vertical, en la industria digital, hemos hablado de cosas tan diferentes como el 5G, la inteligencia artificial, los robots, la digital health, la biomimética, el blockchain. Son cosas muy diferentes, pero al final ninguna de ellas tendría sentido si no estuvieran interconectadas y si no tuvieran una repercusión en todos nosotros, en los ciudadanos. Así que os esperamos el año que viene con más industria digital. Personalmente solo me queda daros las gracias por vuestra atención y gracias al Consorci de la Zona Franca por volver a contar conmigo por tercera edición también en este BNEW. Espero volver a veros el año que viene. Muchísimas gracias por todo.
Now it's a time of changes. Now it's a time to move on. This is the time for solutions. Feel the motion. BNEW is born.
Fabricamos talento. Fabricamos innovación. Y, cómo no, sostenibilidad. Fabricamos una nueva economía. Y un mundo nuevo, en 3D, por supuesto. Pero sobre todo, fabricamos futuro. Y es que fabricamos empleo para más de 137.000 trabajadores. Fabricamos oportunidades globales de negocio en un espacio de más de 10 millones de metros cuadrados. Y fabricamos servicios de vanguardia y ventajas competitivas para más de 175 empresas. Consorci de la Zona Franca. Fabricamos oportunidades para tu futuro.
Welcome to D-Factory, the factory that develops talent, technology, innovation, and of course in the heart of Barcelona. After all, D-Factory is consolidating Barcelona as a European capital of development for Industry 4.0, for digitalization, for transformation, creating 1,500 direct jobs and 5,000 indirect jobs in the city, close to the metro, the harbour and the airport. And promoted by the Consorci de la Zona Franca de Barcelona.